Hey everybody, Nick here, and sorry so much to everybody who's been trying to stay in the live chat here. Unfortunately, YouTube's live chat streaming thing isn't quite up to par, and so I've been kicked off here twice now. You may see it happen again, and if it does, I'm going to go on ahead and call the whole thing off because something is clearly wrong in the world. But that said, I'm going to do my absolute best to stay on the stream this time here. Hopefully, restarting everything has made it work out okay. Here's the dream. That's the hope. So I'm going to go ahead and jump into a question that one of my viewers asked yesterday to start this up, which was, Nick, how many knives do you have in your possession at any given time? The answer to that is a little tricky. I've got my personal kind of private collection of knives I actually enjoy EDCing and whatnot, and that's usually someplace in the vicinity of 8 or 9, maybe 10 knives. Then I have a selection of knives that I use for reviewing, but I don't really EDC. So something like the ZT 452 here, the Spyderco PM2. The Delica I use for reviewing all the time, but I also will EDC on occasion, the Rat, and everybody's favorite, the Medford. But these knives aren't really carried, but they are kept around. And then I've got a bunch of knives that I'm hoping to review here one of these days. Things like the Kershaw Skyline. I've got a bunch of really neat knives that I just need to get to. And then I've got what's on my table for actual review. Loaners that people have sent me, and those tend to go to the front of the list because I want to get people's loaners back home to them. They're doing me a big favor, and I want to treat them with respect. And so at the moment, there are 8 loaners on my table, which is a beautiful thing. So, there you go. That's the very first question. Brian Taylor asked that. I forget if I mentioned that, but there you go. So I'm going to just jump into viewer questions here. Ariel Sirota asks, Nick, you've never talked about where you store your knives. So it depends. Most of the time, my knives I've got like a little drawer insert sort of in a thing that I've made out of Kaizen foam. And Kaizen foam is just wonderful stuff. The John Grimsmo has a video showing off some of it. And I think I showed this off in like Ask the Nick #1 or something like that. But I just cut a bunch of little slots into a drawer and filled it with foam, and that way my knives can just kind of sit in there vertically like this, and it makes it pretty space efficient to store a bunch of knives. And it also has the advantage of I have a certain number of slots in my gear collection, so that, if I want to buy another knife, I kind of need to make some room. And that helps to keep me honest a little bit. It helps to keep things down. So there you go. What they asks, does your fiancé still watch movies when I do videos? On occasion. At the moment, because I'm trying to live stream, she's reading instead. I don't want to use up bandwidth on streaming movies, but it is definitely the case that many a review has been filmed during an episode of Downton Abbey. So if you hear British people being naughty in the other room, that's going to be what's up there. Old guy asks, how do you overcome ball detent drag? So what I assume you're talking about there is the fact that on a lot of folding knives you have a little detent ball in there, although this is a weird example because it's a flattened off ball, but that will always drag along the blade and will actually produce some drag onto the blade in a lock bar sort of knife. Generally, there's no real way to overcome it. It can be tuned very well, and some knives have been tuned such that even though they have a detent ball, they fall shut beautifully. And actually, I always show off that, but this is one that's on my table at the moment. This is a Wii Knives, and it's got very, very little drag either. But often lubrication is the key to that. If it's a well-lubricated detent ball, you're going to be okay there. So, there you go. Tristan Heath asks, could you do a company review on Kizer Knives? That's an interesting question. Kizer is a company that I've handled a bunch of their stuff. I've reviewed a bunch of their stuff, and they're actually sending me more stuff. So these guys right here, these 3 came from Kizer. This is the T.R.E, this is the Guru, and this is the Kala. These are very, very interesting knives here, particularly this little guy. I can't wait to spend more time with this because it really checks a lot of boxes for me. But you're right, Kizer does have some inconsistencies in their quality control. They also have some pretty soft screws, or at least they have in the past. And so I'm not a big fan of that, and the warranty leaves a little to be desired. I'll definitely want to do a company overview, but so far I like a lot of their stuff. I like more than I dislike, but they are definitely far from perfect, and they're not my favorite company by any stretch of the imagination. Kai Bedell asks, is there such a thing as overoiling your knife? Yes, I do it every damn day. If you ask Bird over at the Birdshot IV channel, he studies lubrication. That's his shtick. You know, we always joke that I'm constantly drowning my knives in lubricant. Is it going to hurt anything? Not particularly. What it will do is it'll attract grime and dust and whatnot, because having too much lubrication will allow dirt and gunk and stuff to get trapped in there. For me, this isn't a big problem because I love disassembling my knives. That's a joy to me, and so it's not a huge concern. But if you watch my videos, I will often comment on the fact that I use a lot of lubrication. I'm even trying to dial that back, but that's an important sort of thing. So there you go. Great question. And by the way, for those of you who are asking questions, realize that I only get a little tiny stream of comments on the side here, and they go away after maybe 15 seconds or so. So it's not the case that I'm able to read every single question that's popped up there. And if I don't answer your question, try it again in a couple of minutes, and maybe I'll see it that time. But basically, I'm just, whenever I look over and I'm done with a question, I look over and I find something. Craig Jennings asks, is there a place you recommend for extra washers, backspacers, standoffs, tools, etc.? There are a bunch of good places online, because realize that a lot of knife makers are ordering their parts from off-the-shelf makers like that. Like Alpha Knife Supply is a really common place to buy these things. And, if you go on any of the main forums, Reddit's Knife Club, Blade Forums, those sorts of things, chances are if you show them a picture of the part you're after, somebody will be able to help you out, maybe even on the Instagram. But if you just do some searches, you can find things like bearings and washers and pretty straightforwardly. So that's a great question. It's just a question of where they bought it from originally. 222 or 223 Remington, Rem, I guess, just asks, could be the sleep, rapid eye movement. How can I send you a nifty gadget to try? The approach is to email me. At that point, I'll send back my little disclaimer sort of thing. If you are a company, I want to make abundantly clear that I could call it junk. And if that's not something you're okay with, it's best that we don't do the agreement overall. But yeah, it all starts via email, and we talk it out of there. So, there you go. Let's see here. What is the blue knife in the middle on the right? This right here is the Grimsmo Knives Rask. It's a very interesting sort of an affair. Here's the Grimsmo logo. This is a knife that I badly need to review. I'm just waiting very much until I'm off the honeymoon for it. Overall, it is a wonderful knife. So, there you go. Great question there. Kai Bedell asks, what do you think of G&G Hawk? I think that the Hawks are absolutely, completely insane, and I love it. The Hawks are the folks who made, they had a hand in designing the Chris Reeve tie lock here, which has a really interesting locking mechanism. They've done an OTF out the front auto with no blade play recently. They had a hand in the Buck Marksman. They are mad scientists of the knife world, and every damn time I see something new that they do, it immediately is something I'm kind of interested in. I think they're doing an incredible thing. And so I very much love their work. I haven't had a chance to handle as much of it as I'd like to, but yeah, it's kind of interesting. Let's see here. AKC Pravat asks, where are you located, Nick? You always get the time zones wrong. I am in the Eastern time zone. I am in Michigan, down here of the, sort of in the wrist area of the mitten. Let's see here. Manix 2 or Damascus Kershaw Link. Those are questions that are a little bit harder to answer here just because there were a bunch of differences between these knives, and usually I have reviews. I don't actually have a link yet, a link review up yet. I've got a link, I just haven't gotten to it yet. Beautiful knife. But in those questions, it really boils down to your personal preference. They're both very nice knives. I don't know much about Kershaw's Damascus, but it's worth trying. So, there you go. Cosmo Films, where do you get the best stuff? Either online or a close store like Dick's Sporting Goods or something. Okay. For what it's worth, I always advocate that you work with your local knife shop. If you are lucky enough to have a knife shop, and please do a search. Try and find if there is anything around here that is useful for you. If there's a store that even, sometimes it's your local gun shop, an archery store. There are great knife shops everywhere, but you should always support your local guy first. That said, you're probably not going to find very good deals at your big sporting goods companies. Things like Cabela's, again, the Mountain, or you just mentioned Dick's, because they don't tend to carry a whole lot of variety. You might get something like a Kershaw, but you're probably not going to find Chris Reeve, and you're certainly not going to find anything really weird. So you can get some things there, but generally, if I need to order a knife, I will use one of the major knife retailers, and there were a bunch of them out there. And there's the Blade HQ, Knife Center, what is it? Knife Center, DLT, or DHT, I forget what it is exactly, GP Knives, all sorts of people out there. So there you go. Just look at some of these big online retailers. Look at who's supporting the forums that you like. Look at who's supporting the services you like, that kind of thing. So KnifeWorks, there we go. That was the name I was looking for. I point to the comment on screen. You guys can't see what I'm pointing at, but it's right there. Thank you very much. So there you go. True North, yeah, that's another one. Craig Jennings asks, what knife company has the very best warranty? That's really tough to answer in a lot of ways. Right now, a lot of people point to Chris Reeve. Right now, I actually have a knife that is at Chris Reeve for warranty work. I bought a Sebenza, large Sebenza, that was a lemon. It had a bad action, absolutely just terrible. It was scratchy and ugly. The blade was off-center, and the grind was actually asymmetrical. And so right now, that knife is with Chris Reeve getting serviced. I just don't know. I haven't heard a damn thing from him since they got it, a couple of days ago. And hopefully they're going to treat me right, but that's going to be an interesting test. When I got it, I actually thought, okay, I should test their warranty rather than just putting it back in the package. Luckily, I got it from an authorized retailer, so I know it's not a fake, or at least I can be pretty sure. But still, that was really ugly. ZT has a pretty damn well-known warranty. It's good. Benchmade's pretty good. And a lot of your smaller companies, even if the warranty isn't super permissive, they will work to make it right. A buddy of mine's having a great time. Well, not a great time. Dr. Frunke has been working with Olemic and seems to be pretty happy with the way they're treating a warranty issue on his knives. So, that's a nice thing. Gamma Rayburst is saying, you won't hear anything from Chris Reeve until it's done, Nick. I send it in as well. Hey, thank you very much, Pete. Appreciate the, so that's going to be interesting. We're going to see. Xenopos asks, will you ever review a LionSteel again? That's a really great question. LionSteel, I've reviewed a couple of things that they're involved with. I have reviewed the Spyderco Little Lion Spy, which was terrible. I reviewed the T.R.E, which was a knife that was very interesting and very nicely made in a lot of ways, but was the jack of all trades and the master of none. They were trying to make a knife that was a good flipper, a good thumb opener, and a good slip joint. It just didn't, not slip joint, but two-hand opener, and none of it really worked out well. They make another version that's got a better detent, apparently, but whatever. So, yeah. They're making the SR2, of course, which was a knife that was almost a gem, but it was just terribly, awfully evil to disassemble. Ugly, ugly, ugly. They now make a flipper version that I'm pretty interested in checking out sometime in the future, but I don't know. We'll see. I have no real beef with them, though. Jolly Roger USA asks, come on, Nick, a midtech shootout. So midtech knives are all small batch production sorts of knives. They're a lot of fun. The thing is, though, to do a shootout, to do sort of a head-to-head in the way that I did with budget knives is really expensive, because then you have to have a bunch of midtechs right there in front of you. And at the moment, in terms of, small batch production knives, I have really two. I've got this little guy, the Graham Razel midtech here, and the Olemics. I'm always a little bit torn as to whether it's a midtech or a custom. They're custom made. They're improved, but they are fundamentally a production knife with tweaks to it. Do I have any other midtechs? I'd probably call this the Medford Marauder a midtech. But by and large, midtechs aren't all that super interesting. They tend to be, small batch production is fine. It can be fun. But it's not, so to speak, it's not, I don't know. You tend to pay a lot of money, and the return doesn't seem to be as good as on a really nice production knife. Like, for instance, this guy right here. Let's see here. Sasha Kripkin asks, what do you think about CKF's Custom Knife Factory's M390? They heat treat them a little soft, does it show? So I will be completely honest with you. I have never owned a CKF for a long-term durability test. I don't tend to make, in my reviews, I don't tend to make strong statements about edge retention and long-term kind of differences among different heat treats of steels, unless I've had a knife for a while, I've used it enough to dull it and whatnot. Sometimes it's the case that during a review, I will use a knife all that much, or not all that much, but I will still see it go dull. Something like the Spyderco Salt in H1 steel. That really wasn't a great steel for edge retention. But if I'm judging one company's M390 versus another, my review format, just carrying it for a little while, doesn't tend to give me enough information. So I'm not going to weigh in on that. I mean, generally, manufacturers will report hardness numbers, and that's a very useful guide. But, beyond that, I can't really get too deep into it, and it didn't really strike me in either way. Adam Green asks, hey, Adam, have you ever watched Grimsmo's recent spinner prototype videos? You're talking, of course, about Grimsmo Knives, the guy who made these two. They are working on an everyday carry fidget spinner. I have some spinner reviews up. I am interested. I'm probably going to buy one just because I like the Grimsmos and I want to support the company. But, it looks fine. It looks like a spinner. That's an interesting little thing there. So, let's see here. Gray Holm asks, what knife has the very best detent and my very favorite detent? That's a great question. And it's a little weird and a little subjective. I mean, Grimsmo brothers have really incredible detent. They do a great job of it. And I would say the Norseman is a little bit more so than the Rask. The detent on this knife is just so damn satisfying. It's hard to even express. But there are some other knives with very nice detents. This little guy here, the Olemic, has a very, very, very nice detent. The Shirogorov Neon did as well. Probably the detent that I've liked most of any knife that's been on my table was a Peter Rosenti Custom. It was a Druid loaned to me by my buddy Nico. The video has not gone up yet, but the detent on that knife was just, oh my God, good. I loved it, loved it, loved it. Big, great detent. I can't even begin to tell you how nice that was. And so that probably wins as my very, very favorite detent. I'm getting some requests to mix up the knives on the table here, so we're going to swap the tie lock for the Murata, and we're going to go on ahead and put the Graham out and bring in the Zombie Nick Shabazz. I've shown this off in one video, but this was sent to me by a viewer. The brand of the company is actually Zombie Nick. This is a thing. This is a terrible slip joint, but he actually then had it printed, or did the printing himself, I don't know, and put Shabazz on the back of it. And this is pretty spectacular right here. And then just to top it all off on the smaller blade, you have friends don't let friends eat friends. Nice. So, the Zombie Nick can just live right here. What a gem. That just showed up in a random box in my P.O. box from this guy. Beautiful view. I forget his name, and I feel bad about that guy in Colorado. But either way, I opened that on a box, and I was just laughing my ass off. I'm sorry, I opened the box on the bus, and I was just losing it. So, but then again, I often laugh on the bus, which is why I'm a crazy person. How much harder is it, Rodrigo Teresa asks, how much harder is it to sharpen S110V than S30V? So S30V is not a steel I love sharpening. For whatever reason, it just feels like it's a little tricky to get the burr off of there at the end. S110V is definitely, it takes a little while, but if you've got the right equipment, if you've got a system that's really designed to handle these steels, it's very doable. And it's maybe a question of it takes you 20 minutes to reprofile versus takes you 10. And the very best way to handle those things is to use the factory angle so you're not having to remove a bunch of metal. That's why I always advocate, and why a lot of people, if you're sharpening, instead of trying to use like an angle cube but to gauge the angle numerically, just put a little bit of Sharpie on the blade and then just apply it right there to the pot, and then use the stone to rub off that Sharpie. And when you can rub off all the Sharpie in one pass, you're at the factory angle. That'll save you a lot of time and effort in terms of your sharpening. So, yeah. But that said, I don't let the S110V thing scare you too badly, and remember that most makers will sharpen knives for you even if you have trouble. So if you give it a try and you have some trouble, and you're not using like a belt sander that'll remove too much stock, you can always send it back to Spyderco. Something along those lines. Let's see here. Kai Bedell asks, can you talk about what angle sharpener would be very best for somebody just starting out? That's a great question. Practically speaking, if you are just getting into the knife world, there are a couple of things. You should probably have a strop. And a strop is just a piece of leather. Mine is on the other side of the room there, so I'm not going to go grab it. But it's just a piece of leather with some strop compound on there. That's a beautiful thing, and it helps you to maintain an edge. It helps you to keep your sharp edge sharp. Similarly, a Spyderco shopmaker is really, they should call it the shopkeeper, because it helps to keep a sharp knife relatively sharp. But there's a certain point where you use a knife enough that you need to resharpen it. It's not just a question of a couple of passes on the shopmaker. So I kind of recommend that in those situations, either send it back to the manufacturer or you send it back to a professional sharpener. There are a bunch of people out there on Instagram, on YouTube, etc. out there, and feel free to leave them in the comments your favorite sharpener. But you are very, very well bred. You can pay like $20 to somebody like that and get an incredible edge back. And you'll still be way ahead of buying a bigger system. If you want to do a bigger system, there are a lot of great systems out there. I personally use the KME system. I'm a big fan of it now, and I bought one just kind of on a lark after my buddy Bud told me about it, and then suddenly I kind of fell in love. But I use an Edge Pro as well. I'm sorry, I've used an Edge Pro as well. I haven't really used it since I got the KME. But nonetheless, that's another really nice system. And of course, there's the Landskis and things like that. So, like I said, if you're just getting started, get a strop, maybe get a shop maker, and then just, when the time comes, send it off to a professional. So, good question there. Let's see here. Adam Green asks, hey, Nick, what's the best thing about having a channel on YouTube like I have? That's a really great question there, Adam. Honestly, it's got to be the people. I like very, very, very much having a nice impact in people's lives. For instance, very often I get a chance to chat with just my viewers, people who are interested in buying a knife, buying a watch, buying gear, and just to learn a little bit about them. I was just chatting this morning with a buddy of mine. I'm not going to use his name out of respect, but, he is a gemologist. Like, he knows how to talk about diamonds and to grade them, and, showed me pictures of some, multi-million-dollar diamonds he worked with. But, to learn a little bit about his life story and how he's gotten out of that trade, because there's some real ugly in that industry, and that's kind of neat. And there are other people in here, many of whom are commenting now, that are just like, I love interacting with these folks. That's nice. The other thing is, and let's just be real here, it is absolutely an enabler. I am already a person who likes gear. Let's be real here. I wouldn't be doing this channel if I wasn't. But it is very, very, very dangerously easy for me to say something like, I kind of like this watch. This is a Seiko SRPA 21 party watch. I kind of like this watch. Well, if I buy one, I can put it on the channel and do a review. Bam! Case closed. That's all the justification I need. So, there were a bunch of really interesting pieces of gear that I probably never would have tried without the channel. Here's another good example. This little guy right here. This is a silly knife. This is the CRKT Fulcrum. Watch this. This is how you open this knife. You push the scale to the side, then you pop it back open. There is zero chance in heck I would have bought this knife without the channel. Yet, because I have a channel, I'm very, very interested in picking this up and trying it out. And you know what? It's actually not a terrible knife. And so I love the ability to just do that and to have the the justification to do so. It helps. I'll be completely honest. I kind of suspect that there are manufacturers who are a lot nicer to me and makers who are a lot nicer to me because I have a channel. That's kind of nice. It's also kind of ugly, though, because I wish that I was getting, in a lot of ways, the same treatment as just some random person on the street. I've had a couple of experiences now where people say, oh, I've had a lot of trouble with that guy, and I've had a great experience. That's always tough to balance. But for me, the biggest benefit of having the channel is meeting the people and helping people. And when people shoot me an email saying just, Nick, hey, I want you to know, I bought a Slysz Bowie, and I love it. I never would have known about this knife without you. That brings me so much joy. Actually, here we go. We'll swap that out there. Because, I don't know, I love making a difference for people. So, there you go. But I also like getting a lot of gear. And have a good justification for it there. So Galat's asking me about browse blades. I actually talked about that in the past, Ask the Nick. So bring that up there. What the asks, Nick, do you own a Rolex? I do not. And there's a pretty good chance that I never will. Maybe someday I'd do a GMT Master or something like that. And in many ways, the Rolex GMT Master 2 would be a very ideal watch. It's a good size, it's got the GMT function, and it's a beautiful thing. But at the same time, Rolex is a little bit flashy, and let's face it, it's way outside my budget. This right here is an Omega Seamaster, which is, luckily it's in quartz, which means it's much more affordable. Okay, I'm sorry, that's a terrible thing to say. This watch still goes for about $1,000, but it is much more affordable than their $5,000 or $6,000 or $7,000 coaxial mechanicals. But nonetheless, this is something I can wear. Again, with the justification of the channel, I never would have bought this without the channel. But I love it, so wonderful thing. But I don't know that I can justify spending $6,000 or $8,000 on a Rolex. I just don't know that I can do it. I've contemplated, in fact, I've got my eye on a very specific Omega Planet Ocean. They're 39mm with the 8800 movement. I desperately want to do it, but the problem is that would tie up like $4,000, and that's an incredible amount of money. And I could probably swing it, but I really probably shouldn't. Even with the channel, there's just a huge bath ahead of me there. And so when I look at Rolex, which is even more expensive, that's going to get ugly really quickly. I can't afford to take those baths. Adam Green says, maybe when you hit 1 million subscribers. Absolutely. If I hit 1 million subscribers, I will go buy the Rolex. Heck, 100,000, I would do that. But that's never going to happen. Let's just be real here. Steven Sine asks, how about a Grand Seiko? I had a Grand Seiko review on the channel, and I would love to pick up a spring drive Grand Seiko. Right now, my biggest problem with Grand Seiko is that they do not offer the watch I want, which is one of their smaller spring drive movement watches with loom. All of their smaller spring drives are completely unloomed. And so it doesn't make a lot of sense for me. I like having loom on my watch, meaning that if you expose this guy to light, yeah, can we see? Yeah, it's not charged enough. But still, that's a beautiful thing for me. And any watch that I buy needs to have some degree of loom. And so Grand Seiko doesn't quite have what I want. But I wish that they did. And hopefully one of these days I'll do it. The Grand Seiko Diver is loomed, but it's also huge. And I have relatively small wrists. I mean, this is not a big watch, and it looks pretty big on me. So, there you go. Let's see, Adam Green asks, so when am I, actually everybody is currently asking, when am I getting married? That's a really good question. So basically, we are at a point right now in our financial life, the fiancé and I, where we are, it would be very, very financially a bad idea for us to be married. Because she is finishing school and whatnot, and it just doesn't make any good financial sense for us to be married. But the thing is, we love each other. We're together, we live together, we've been together for 7.5 years now. We take our time. But that's okay. And so we've got plans. We're hoping and planning on probably next spring, so a year from April or May, when things will change, financially speaking. But for the moment, we're very happy being engaged, and we're in the planning. But trust and believe, you guys are going to see the ring when that comes up. And trust and believe, I'm thinking very hard about the ring. So it's the one piece of gear I will EDC every day. So, great question. Kai Bedell asks, what does the fiancé think of the channel? She is just as amused by it as I am. The fact that I am considered by some to be an expert in these things is hilarious. And, she's happy because, it gives me something to do. And, it also helps to offset some of the costs of trying new gear that I'd probably be doing anyways. So, she likes it. And, it's also nice because right now, like I said, she is in school. And so there are times when she's doing homework where I can be doing this, and then we just meet up afterwards. The joy of having filming, these are two lights right up above here. And there you go. So, Spot Family asks, how about designing my own knife for production? I've talked about this before. I'm not a knife maker, I'm a designer. And, I'm sorry, I'm not a knife maker, I'm a reviewer. And so I don't really know that I could do that effectively. I'd love to collaborate with somebody. That might be a fun thing, but at the same time, I'm not really... I know that my skills are not there. I don't design that. I design a bunch of other things. So, it's amusing. Let's see here. And by the way, thank you to everybody who's answering questions in the comment stream that I haven't gotten a chance to answer. BlitzBBFFL says hybrid expert and jackass. That is right where I'm going for here. I know a lot of stuff about some stuff. I know very little about other stuff. And, you know, I'm doing my best over here. So hopefully people will find it useful. What the asks, what knife do I carry to work? Jackspert, nice. It's different every day. At the moment, right now, in my pocket is this little guy right here. This is the Cold Steel Ultimate Hunter. This is not a knife that I would generally need for my work, but at the same time, it's a knife that I've wanted to, that I have on loan for review, and I need to get to know better. I carried this already a little bit, but I don't fully grasp it. I need to better understand this in order to be able to review it. So it's getting a little bit more carry. But usually I'm carrying a slightly different knife every day. Maybe it's one from my permanent collection. Pardon me. But often it's a loaner, because I want to carry those. I want to get some experience with them. So in some ways it becomes a little bit of a luxury when I get to carry something that's my own and that I love. So, yeah. Getting a Show Us the Z Hunter. Here it is indeed. Oh, the Z Hunter. What a freaking gem, that one. Let's see here. Cosmo Films asks, what knife would you recommend for a beginner from Spyderco? The Delica is always where I send people there. The Polestar is not a bad choice. I've got a review of that coming up this week, actually. So Thursday's the disassembly, Saturday's the review. So keep that in mind. Sorry, ZS Crave says Z Sploosh. Nice. But yeah. That's a beautiful thing. Gray Hole Mask, should Spyderco move to BD1 for all their value folders? Maybe. You know, honestly, the difference between BD1 and 8CR13 and whatnot isn't super strong. You know, it's nice to have American steels out there, but it's not, I don't know. It's not bringing me so much joy either. So I feel like Spyderco's got other things they need to do. Let's see here. Favorite high-end folder with a blade length of 2.5 or less inches. That's really tricky. There aren't that many people making really high-end knives under 2.5 inches. I forget what the Chris Reeve Nandi is, but that's a really interesting choice. Another one is the Spyderco Dragonfly. I believe this is under 2.5, and in the ZDP steel, this is a very, very nice little folder. It's a really excellent thing. So there's that. I'm trying to think of other really high-end small folders. This is an area that the custom knife making and mid-tech production world just never goes into. I wish that people were making more great small knives. So hopefully more of that'll come up, but at the moment I don't have that. Adam Green asks, hey Nick, are you a steel and metallurgy expert? Absolutely not. And in fact, very often, it's to the point where I don't even want to talk about steel, because there are 3 or 4 people who will always come into the live, to the comment section and pick apart every damn statement I say with this incredible, like, oh, I proved you wrong, sort of thing. I mean, I had it when I was teaching. It's always the same. There are students who want to show up the teacher, and that's fine. But the thing is, I am not a metallurgy expert. I use knives on a regular basis, but I don't know all that much about exactly what each bit of chromium is going to do, and I can't tell you things about carbide distributions necessarily. But that's something that I feel like doesn't matter as much as most people think. There are, for me, a couple of classes of steels. I have my What's the Very Best Knife Steel video where I go into details, but it's basically, there are steels that are terrible. There are steels that are okay. They're fine for everyday carry. There are good-to-go solid steels, and there are great steels. I don't really try and go a whole lot further. If somebody asks me, hey, Nick, what's the difference between RWL 34 and CPM 154? There are differences. Do they matter? No, not terribly. So, yeah, that's a great question. I do not consider myself a metallurgy expert. I'm just doing my best here. Let's see here. Jimmy Gray asks, tritium vials of phospholuminescence. So he's asking about lume on watches. You can have a lume that's like this, that's a passive sort of chemical, where when you expose it to ultraviolet light, it will, well, light in general, it will glow. And you can have tritium vials that are actually a radioactive substance that's hitting phosphor and lights up. Lume like this guy will actually light up more brightly here. I'll charge it up real quick. Here we go. This kind of lume will charge up much more and be much brighter at first than a tritium watch, but a tritium watch will last forever and ever. You never need to charge it up. So if you are a mole person living underground, tritium has some definite benefits. The problem is tritium is bulky and it has a half-life. It's a radioactive material, and so after a while it'll go away. And so that's why a lot of your older watches no longer, like your vintage, no longer has any lume. So that's a great question. I'm hoping to get some tritium in for review here one of these days. That is the not a watch with tritium. I'm not going to show up with a bunch of tritium isotope and a balloon and say, hey, okay, this is some quality tritium right here. It's not my scene. But yeah, nonetheless, great question there. What else is coming up here? What company do you think treats the steel the best? Which does best blade geometry and best grind? That's a good question. Honestly, I can't talk about heat treat necessarily because, like I said, I haven't spent all that much time with these steels. If we talk about blade geometry, though, I find that Spyderco tends to be a little bit better than the norm. So often in the tactical knife world, you get knives that are really, really thick right behind the edge here, and this means a terrible geometry for cutting. I mean, you can cut something open with this method, but you're not going to enjoy the process. And even for instance, this little Alamec here is pretty thick behind the edge. Let's be real about that. But Spyderco tends to make knives that are fairly damn thin behind the edge. The Slysz Bowie is a great example of this. This is a knife that cuts really well. Or, the PM2 even, which is around here someplace, is actually pretty thin behind the edge. And so this is a very nice cutter. So Spyderco is they're better than most. They still have their exceptions. The Spyderco Valaton was a little bit thick behind the edge, for instance. The Techno was ridiculous. But they tend to do pretty well. There are other companies, though, out there that really specialize in making good cutters. Things like that. Let's see here. What do you think about old slip joints like a Trapper or a Whiffler? I don't know either of those. Well, I've heard of Trappers, but the thing is, I'm not a big traditional guy. I mean, I've got the Zombie Nick here, obviously, and I've got a GEC 99, but they're not an area of passion for me. I tend to like some of the modern conveniences like a pocket clip and whatnot. So it's a great question there. Favorite grind or why? That's really tough because different grinds are great for different situations. On a knife that's a little bit more hard-usey, for instance, the Razel here, although actually this is not super thick behind the edge, but having a lower grind like this is very useful for harder use, whereas having a very high grind, like on your PM2 here, makes it great for slicing and things like that. I don't really have strong opinions. There are knives where the grind works really well for the knife, and there are knives where the grind really doesn't work all that well. So, great question, though. Let's see here. The Slysz Bowie is $550 US in the UK now. I am so sorry to hear that. This is a great knife, but I don't know that it's worth $550. I mean, maybe it's the case that other knives are worth even more than that, but this part of the appeal of the Slysz Bowie is that you're getting something that is high-end quality, Sebenza-ish at a much lower price. When the price goes up, some things that are gems stop being gems. I mean, an Ontario Rat #1, which is absolutely a gem in the D2 steel, if it sold for $100 would no longer really be a gem. It'd still be okay, but yeah. Let's see here. What benefits do the Spidey holes offer over thumb studs, considering the extra space that they take up? That's a good question. For me, at least, there are a couple of benefits to them. They feel a little bit more ergonomic to me. Using a thumb stud, let's see here. I need a good thumb stud knife. Here we go, the Cold Steel. Using a thumb stud, there's something that's jabbing right into your finger, whereas on the Spidey hole, it's kind of fitting the contour of your finger naturally and rotating around. That's nice. For me, though, the bigger benefit of a Spidey hole, or any kind of a hole-based opening mechanism, is that you, as you're cutting into something, it just goes past the hole. As opposed to on a thumb stud, if it's done poorly, this one is actually done well, so that as you're cutting, the thumb stud won't hit on whatever you're doing. Oh, here we go, the perfect example of this. A thumb disc here is, to me, a tragedy because when it is in the cutting path, because watch, if I were to use this Emerson to actually cut into something, whatever I was cutting into would snag on this thumb disc, and that's really ugly. And so the Spidey hole has the advantage of it won't snag on much of anything. It might get a little goopy in there if you're cutting into some sort of a gel, but, nonetheless. I very much like the hole rather than something like a thumb stud or a thumb disc in that way. That said, there were good thumb studs, absolutely 100%. There were great knives running on thumb studs, but, it all depends. But that's the advantage, at least in my mind, on the whole. Sasha Kripkun asks, yeah, Emersons aren't really meant for cutting. That is true. Emerson's an entirely different world. Oh, boy, are they ever. Going to be filming that one here soon. Let's see here. Ion Studios asks, what's your view on a mirror edge for an EDC knife? That's a really great question. So I like mirror edges. I think that they're very, very, very pretty. I mean, take a look at this. I spent some time on this guy. But the thing is, you don't need a mirror edge. It's kind of become a thing in the knife world, but a mirror edge does not necessarily mean that the knife is any sharper. You can have a knife that is just as sharp with a working edge as you do with a very sharp, with a very strong mirrored edge. And in some cases, there are advantages to having a grittier edge. And so it can be fine. A lot of my EDC knives do have a relatively mirrored edge on them, but that doesn't mean that, I don't know, it doesn't mean that they're any better or worse for EDC just because of the mirror edge. That's kind of a vanity thing more than anything. So, yeah, that's a great question there. Jerry Harris asks, where did that Z Hunter come from? Okay, sure. It's story time. I don't know if I've told this story before. Stop me if I have. I had a video planned. So way back when, I was working on, early in the channel, a video that used to be, it was a decent video, where I had just gotten an Ontario Rat No. 2. And the Rat No. 2 is a great knife, but a lot of people are very, I didn't know about it. And so I wanted to get something that was inexpensive but well thought of, and contrast it with something that was the Z Hunter, that was really, really cheap. And so I was walking home from work one day, because it was the summertime and it was nice, and I stopped at every single gas station I passed. And inside every single gas station I passed, I asked, do you guys sell any knives? And, realized that I am just nerdy as heck. Look, and I am not the kind of guy who walks into a gas station and buys a knife generally. And so in each of these gas stations, and this is, a fancy area, they just kind of kept judging me, and no, I'm sorry. They'd send me to, show me like an X-Acto blade or something like that. No, that's not what I'm after. I want a gas station knife. So I walked to 4 or 5 different gas stations, and it was raining that day, so I'm in a raincoat and everything. And then finally I walk into a gas station, and this is a special gas station in a lot of ways. It's a service station sort of thing, so it's still got the little service area behind it. And, it's the kind of place that you walk in and you can smell that you've walked into a service station. No problem with service stations, but this is not your high-end sort of place. And I asked the guy, hey, and I'm getting exasperated at this point, hey, do you have a knife? And the guy is this big old, I think, Persian guy. And he points at this case. And there's this glass case in the corner. And in this glass case, on the top shelf are bongs. Just flat out, they are the devices designed for smoking pot. Or for tobacco use only, sorry. And on the next shelf down, what was it? It was something, I think they were like high-end lighters and things like that. I mean high-end, meaning, fancy purple Chinese lighters. And then on the bottom, underneath more bongs, was 2 boxes. One had a bright orange knife that wasn't that interesting. And underneath that, there was the Z Hunter. And that's when I first laid eyes on this lifelong companion of this little guy here. And so I saw the Z Hunter, and it was just sitting in its little case. And the case, hold on, I'll show you the case, because it's part of the joy, really. This is how a Z Hunter comes. You have this box, and that's really a part of the joy of a Z Hunter. And so this guy was sitting, see right here, proof I do use my knives, on-screen cutting demo. But the Z Hunter was sitting out something like this, where it had like the box here and then the knife, and I'm looking at this, and it's like this bright neon green corn cob just calling to me from across the room. And so I walk over to the case, and I realize that the case is locked shut. And so here I am, in a raincoat, looking just nerdy as hell, gesturing to the guy, hey, will you come please unlock this case? And he kind of gives me this look like, wait, really? And he comes over and he unlocks the case, and I walk in and I grab this little guy out of there and I flip it, and it's terrible. It is just brutally awful and terrible. The lockup is 150 freaking percent. It was awful. And then I have to say to this guy, oh, I want this. And he gives me this look. Like, I have never been judged as harshly in my life as this jackass did when I asked him to buy the Z Hunter. I paid $10 for this Z Hunter. $10. You can buy these in bulk online for $3.50. And that's how I buy them for Patreon patrons. But I paid $10 for this. And I'm embarrassed at this point, because it's like I am buying this knife at a gas station. And so I did like the thing like if you're buying lube at the grocery store, where you always go and you buy something else. Like, oh, I'll get some bread, and I'll get I need some drink mix. And so you come up to the cashier like it's going to make it better that you've got a big thing of KY and some drink mix and so I grab a payday bar and a Mountain Dew and buy the freaking Z Hunter. And I put it on a credit card, which means that there's a paper trail off of buying the Z. Oh, it was... And so this guy he's just looking at me and kind of shaking his head. And so I walk out of there with the Slysz Bowie in my pocket and the Z Hunter in the other one. And just like... Oh, man. So I came home that night and I filmed the inexpensive versus cheap video. And at the time, I just thought this was a little throwaway guy. But then, well, he's grown on me. This is the Z Hunter. I have many Z Hunters. As a matter of fact, I just ordered 35 more of them because, oh my God, my life is weird. But this is the Z Hunter, the one where the stop pin flew out. And, oh, the Z Hunter. So that's how I got the Z Hunter. That's the story of the Z Hunter's birth. I went back recently to that gas station just to see if they had anything else that was just wonderful. And they have actually gotten out of the knife business. I think the guy just looked at me and thought to himself, okay, I can't be supporting this. But they no longer have, they still have the case with the bongs and whatnot, but no knives. Sad. So this was really the twilight of Z hunting. I got there just in time. So, yeah. And $10, I got so ripped off. It's spectacular. But it's priceless in so many ways. Let's see. Alrighty then. Sarah Jin asks, what do you think about We Knives? That's a great question. We Knives is a company that makes incredible knives with incredible actions and stupid screws. So if We Knives dropped the terrible screws, I would be incredibly over the freaking top in love with their work. But with these screws, it's like Neil deGrasse Tyson walks up and kicks me in the balls. Like, I still respect your work deeply, but you are a jackass. That's how I feel about We Knives. Like, I respect them deeply for their knife making, but you suck for using these screws. So when they fix that, I'm going to be in love with them. But there you go. Sorry, I'm a big Neil deGrasse Tyson fan. Great guy. Moving along there. Let's see here. Shining Edges asks, why don't you like the Indiglo as much as conventional looms? That's a great question. If you compare, so Indiglo is some watches have a little feature, Timex's specifically, where if you squeeze the crown, the entire face of the watch lights up. This is nice because it allows you to check no matter the time, you can always just come over and check the line. That's great. The problem is that it's only available in the Timex watches, and the beautiful thing about conventional lume is that you don't have to do anything at all. You can always just look over at it, and even if it's sitting on your bedside table, you can see the lume, if it's well done. Indiglo can be very nice, but a good conventional lume, I think, is a little bit better. So that's a great question there. I really, really wish that there was a little bit more innovation in the lume world there. Kai Bedell asks, why did I get rid of the ZT562 CF? That's a great knife, absolutely. The thing is, the reason I got rid of that, like so many other knives in my collection, is this guy right here. The Graham Razel is... it's kind of my harder use sort of knife. If I'm going to be hardcore, if I'm going to be doing renovation stuff, if I'm going to be doing anything crazy, this is going to be what comes with me on a regular basis. I love this knife very, very much, and every time I was in a situation where I would have carried the 562, this guy came in my pocket instead. It's not a real knock on the 562, but it's just, this is so damn good. And so I don't carry the 562, so it left the collection. Pardon me. So yeah, great question though. It is still an incredible knife, and it's one of the best knives you can get in that 250 to 260 range. Let's see here. Is the Razel on bearings? Hard use and bearings don't mix well. So Sasha, I agree completely. The Razel is indeed on bearings, as is the 562. That's a great point. I've mentioned this a few times in my bearings versus washes video. It is ideal for a harder use knife to have washers, ideally a phosphor bronze washer. The thing is, that's generally more of a concern if you're going to be out in the field with the inability to clean your knives for a little while. With this guy, if I really get it gunked up in there, I just get to take it apart and disassemble it, and for me that's a joy. I'm a big fan of it. But I don't know. It'd be nice to have some more Dav washers on here, but this action is just so damn good on bearings that I can't really argue. Okay. Let's see here. Mr. Gear Bear asks, Nick, is that your real silhouette on Knife Gripes? So those of you unfamiliar, I've been working with Knife News to do a series called Knife Gripes with Nick Shabazz. It's completely independent of the channel. I just send them some videos. He asked if the silhouette is actually me. No, it is not. That was a stock photo that they found online. I provided the script for the intro, the inner world thing. That was all me. But I didn't give them the voice acting. That was another voice actor. But still, they came up with all the pictures. They came up with that. That was them. But I did ask for a faceless silhouette there because I thought it would be pretty funny. Because that's kind of become a running gag on the channel that I never show my face. Let's see here. Into spinners yet? Greg B asked that. So I have my Nick's take on fidget spinners. These are the little, I don't have one on my desk at the moment. It's at work. They're fine. It's not something I'm going to spend a whole lot of my life on, though, and I realize that I don't like reviewing them. There are people who love getting into the minutiae of the spinners, but I'm not one of them. So, there you go. The Phantom of Knife Review. Let's see here. What the asks, how's your Russian buddy? As far as I know, he's doing pretty good. He's been busy lately, but, everything's okay. Let's see here. Curly Howard says you can see the face reflection in your iPad every now and then, indeed. And that's the thing. I'm not like Subcomandante Marcos here. My identity is not secret to protect, I don't really care all that much. At the end of the day, what does it matter? I'm a pretty boring individual. But at the same time, the reason I keep my face out of off camera is that I want to have a little bit of separation between my private life, where I do this, and my work life. Those are two separate situations. But, so yeah, you can see my face in a couple of places there. And, people who go to Blade Show might see me walking around, or at least might hear me walking around. But, there you go. So I haven't shown my face. I don't really intend to, and I'd kind of like to keep it that way. There's not a whole lot of reason to be any less private than I am right now for me. Swanepoel Designs, and Nick Foster asks about Swanepoel Designs. I've been looking at their Instagram feed, and I am kind of curious. They tend to use stupid pivots, like the 5-dot South African pivot, but I like the idea, and I'm going to keep them in mind one of these days. I have nothing on the table here. Let's fill in some blanks here. Kizer Guru, Lamech, why not? Here's a Wii. Here's an Emerson, just to scare some people who are tuning in late. The Benchmade Precinct. T.R.E, Cold Steel. Here, we'll put the Emerson next to the Cold Steel. It'll be like a festival of things Nick doesn't quite understand. And, what the heck, Kizer, Kala, whatever. Tie lock. Somebody's asking for tie lock. I'll give him some tie lock. There we go. A little bit of, a little bit of something to check out. The Guru is an interesting knife, by the way. A lot of people have been asking about it. I haven't gotten a chance to carry it yet, by the way. Really, Kizer? Really? But it's got some nice ergonomics. It's neat. There's a lot of good here, absolutely. And so I'm looking forward to spending some more time with this guy. It's also pretty thin behind the edge, which I appreciate very much. So, oh yeah, the Z Hunter isn't on the table. Here, I'll replace it with something of equivalent quality. Oh, burn! Moose2638 asks about Yarosh. I think it's Yarosh. Jarosh? I'm not quite sure. Anyways, Jarosz knives in my future. Maybe, sure. I haven't really... None of his stuff has jumped out at me terribly, but I'd like to check it out one of these days. So, there you go. DSDABS asks, you honestly couldn't look past the clip and the pivot on the Neon. I could, absolutely. I like the knife a lot, and, you know, if I had $1 million and I had an unlimited budget and unlimited storage, I definitely would have kept the Neon. It is a very, very nice knife, but the thing is, the way I do my collection, I really try and curate it. I try and do one in, one out sort of an affair. There were other knives that just, you know, I wanted to own a little bit more than I wanted to keep that Neon. And so, for instance, the Grimsmo Rask, you know, in many ways replaces the Neon for me. I wish the Rask was smaller, is my biggest issue with it. But, you know, this is a great Neon substitute for me. And so it just came a question of, do I want to have the Neon in a condition where I don't carry it much during the winter because the clip isn't very good, and where I'm always a little bit worried about the free spin and pivot? Or do I want to have $700 to do something else? It's a great question. Let's see here. Nick, would you have a 941 if it had no fit and finish issues ever? Asks Eden Ofa. He's talking about the Benchmade 941. So Benchmade... Oh, come on. This is a Benchmade precinct. Interesting little knife. You know, Benchmade makes some very nice knife designs, and unfortunately they're having some quality control issues in a serious way. I mean, look at the centering on this. Not so stellar there. But nonetheless, the thing is, if you get a good one, their designs can be very, very nice. The 941 is a knife that I liked very much. The one I had was actually pretty decent, quality control-wise, once I'd worked on it. But, you know, it didn't really grab me in the same way that some other knives did. The 940 is unquestionably a good knife, but is it better than, for instance, PM2? I don't know about that. You know, the Benchmade Valet is a knife that really, if somebody said, Nick, you have to own a Benchmade, it would probably be the Valet. It's basically a 3-inch 940, and it's spectacular. Very, very nice little knife, and if I could get one with zero fit and finish issues, and I had to get a Benchmade for my permanent collection, that'd probably be it. So there you go. Let's see here. Gonzo Asenrenmu, Mara Movidio asks, so Gonzo Knives is a company that predominantly produces, shall we say, homage designs. They are designs that have been taken from other people. They're not trying to label them as, you know, it's not, for instance, that a Gonzo looks exactly like a PM2 and is labeled as a Spyderco. Instead, they're knives that are basically, they are a Spyderco PM2. They're just relabeled as Gonzo. That's ugly to me. I don't like that very much. In fact, the one Gonzo that I was sent as a gift, where is it? Oh. Come here, Gonzo. Hold, please. There we go. The one Gonzo that I actually do have, I was sent this guy as a gift, and I thought this was an original design, but then somebody pointed out that this is a ProTech, I want to say, SR3, or something along those lines. And so it's just like Gonzo doesn't do a damn thing that's original. And that bugs the crap out of me. Sanrenmu definitely takes design cues from other companies, but Gonzo, they really, really rip other people's faces off. And so it's kind of a company that it's just like, sure, you make okay knives, and honestly, this little guy has better tolerances in the axis lock than a lot of Benchmades that I've handled. Let's be real here. But at the same time, I have a lot of trouble supporting them, given that they are basically just stealing designs. They disagree with that, of course, and, it's not a legally actionable sort of thing, but it is just ugly as heck. Let's see here. Let's see. Jushiro Ukitake asks, I have a mirrored edge on my Norseman. I do indeed. How did you do it? So, I did this on the KME. I just clamped it down, and I actually clamped it 2 ways. I clamped it like this, and then I clamped it again like this. That said, Ron at KME has since informed me, after seeing some discussion of that is not the approach, that I should just keep one consistent angle, but I should sharpen here, and then completely, not like scooping around, because then you'll wear off this little clip here, this little tip, just do a separate pass over here, and so that way you can do that. But anyways, I just used a conventional clamped system. The recurve on this guy isn't so strong that I couldn't use a generic stone, and so that's how I did it. But I did it at home. It probably took me 3 hours or so. I was watching some terrible movie while I did it. I'm trying to remember which one. Oh, actually, no, it was a good movie. It was, I think, Sisters. Birdshot IV recommended that one to me. But anyways, Sebastian Fox asks, what do you think about foxes? How do you think they compare to the average canine, like dogs or wolves? So, Sebastian Fox, I get the sense that there may be a conflict of interest there, that you may have some vested interest in foxhood being promoted in this way. And so, given that conflict of interest, foxes are very clearly the very best of canine options available to you. Great question. Let's see here. If Nick was king, what knife laws would exist? That's a great question. If Nick was king, the world would be a very weird place, that's for damn sure. Honestly, I feel like most of the laws that we have for other issues pretty much cover it. Knife laws tend to be used to harass individual people of individual groups more than they are to address a given problem. If you rob somebody with a knife, we have a law for that. It's called armed robbery. If you vandalize something with a knife, we have a law for that. It's vandalism. If you use it in murder, oh boy, we have a law for that. It's called murder. Rape, etc. All of the things that people do with knives that need to be made illegal are by and large already illegal. And so laws that just say you can't carry this object with you no matter what, to me, strike me as a little bit silly. There is certainly something to be said in situations where, for instance, not everybody should be packing a flamethrower on a regular basis. That's not a great approach. People can very easily hurt other people with this. But a pocket knife, to me, I look at them as tools fundamentally, and I don't know that knife laws are actually really accomplishing that much aside from putting people in jail. So I'm not a big fan of knife laws. I'm a big fan of having laws that are specific enough that if people commit a crime and do something wrong with a knife, they can be thrown away. Well, I'm sorry, locked away, that is. Although, okay, I'm not going to go into the politics of that. But either way, rehabilitation is a good thing. Anyways, but I don't really feel like we need strong knife laws. So, there you go. Great question there. What other questions are coming up here? LionSteel T.R.E. versus Kizer Gemini. I would probably go with the Gemini. The T.R.E. just had a weak detent. The Gemini was doing very nice. Who just said that? Sasha Kripkun says, yeah, but there's a difference between a pocket knife and a Cold Steel Espada XL. Absolutely. And you see, there's also a law in many places called brandishing, which means, and this works for, I believe, for handguns, for etc., where basically you're showing off a weapon or a tool in an effort to scare somebody away. So, like, if I'm walking down the street and somebody, I don't know, somebody cuts me off in traffic and I'm showing my knife like, I'll get you. That should probably be illegal separately. And, where you get into, like, the people carrying katanas, a Cold Steel Espada XL, like, if you whip out a Cold Steel Espada XL pocket sword in the middle of a Starbucks in order to take the cap off a bottle, you are being a jackass. It's probably not illegal, but you're going to face some social consequences, and honestly, I'm pretty okay with that. And so, you're right, there's definitely a line to be drawn there, and if you're just trying to intimidate people by carrying a huge knife, that's pretty ugly, and it's getting to be towards menacing and some of those other laws. Great question. The Espada XL, oh, what a ridiculous knife. Let's see here. What do I think about Cold Steel? Oh, boy, don't get me started. I got whole discussions of that and other things. Derek M asks, ZT456 maintenance video. I sold that guy a long time ago, so unfortunately, I don't have one to maintain. However, it functions very similarly to the 562. So if you check that out, you'll know the basics. Doroteo Degollado asks, do you use your knives in public? Absolutely. I'm cautious about it, and, so I want to make sure that, for instance, and that's part of the reason why some knives don't get carried. For instance, this guy, the ZT452, doesn't tend to get carried very much, because if I whip this out in the waiting room of my dentist to, I don't know, cut open a package or something like that, people are going to look at me a little bit funny. But I have no shame about taking a pocket knife out of my pocket, using it to cut something open, and then putting it back in my pocket without further comment. And I think that that's the way that in many ways pocket knives will become more accepted in the greater society. If more boring people just take out a knife, use it as a tool, and put it away, then that's a beautiful thing. I think, though, that it's a little bit problematic when people are kind of using their knives as fidget toys. If you're just sitting at the bus stop doing one of these things, I mean, that's fun, certainly, but it gets to be weird, and it's a little bit menacing, and that's kind of why we can't have nice things. So I'm of the opinion that if you use a tool in public, what you do in the privacy of your own home or at work, if you're around like-minded individuals, no problem. But if you're using a knife in public, use it as a tool and then put it away very, 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 very quickly. So there you go. Edenova says, Nick, we both know you want one. Why don't you have a ZT450CF in ZDP? Because I want one, absolutely. But when the time came up, it was like $250, and I want one, but I don't know that I carried. I used to have a 450, just 450. I love the knife. I just never carried it that much, and so it didn't stick around. Great question, though. Anthony Childs says, what do you think about Jim Skelton knives? So Jim Skelton is another prominent YouTube knife person. He does a lot of great showcases of high-end custom knives. He has recently started an effort to actually get into knife making. And I think he's starting a Patreon and whatnot. Look, I wish him all the luck in the world. And I very much hope that his move into being a knife maker goes really well for him. And it seems to be personally fulfilling for him. I can see as a knife reviewer having that desire to get deeper into that and really be the change you want to see in the world. Make the knives you want to see. I hope that he does a great job. I haven't handled any of his stuff, so I can't actually do a full review. And he makes fixed blades, so I'm not all that interested in them anyways. But not because of him, but just because I don't like fixed blade knives generally. But I hope that it very much pays off for him, and that I hope that he's making incredible stuff. Maybe someday if he goes folding, I'm going to check it out. Matthias Mertens asks, what's my stance on guns? That's a great question. I answered that in one of the Ask the Nick videos very, very carefully, and there you go. That's a very controversial issue in the United States right now, and elsewhere in the world, certainly. And so, I don't want to get too deep into it, but I very much enjoy shooting. It's fun to put holes in paper, but it's not an area of passion of mine, particularly. I love knives as tools, 100%, and I use tools on a regular basis. I am very, very lucky in that I don't ever have to use a gun. And so, there you go. No sense in me bringing them up too much on the channel. But check that Ask the Nick to find out more about that. Let's see here. Greg B. asks, boxes or briefs? Greg, I think some things are best left to the imagination. Let's see here. S35VN or S110V? That's tough to say. S35 is a steel I like very much. S110 is a great steel as well. They're both good to go. Personally, S35VN is the devil, I know, but S110 is not something I turn my nose up at ever. Let's see here. Is there a risk between YouTubers and forumites? What's your take? Jim M. asks. That's a great question. So I like the knife forums. Reddit's Knife Club is a great community, although in full disclosure, I'm now a moderator for it. The Blade forums I hang out on as well. There is definitely, at least in some sub-forums within the Blade Forums world, a little bit of a, I don't even know what to call it, maybe a rivalry, maybe just a, mutual, Well, there's not a great deal of respect for the YouTube knife world on some of these forums. And I've taken some heat from these forums previously. On the Chris Reeve Knives forum, I posted a disassembly video of the Sebenza, showing the technique that I use that works beautifully for me. And somebody commented and talked about how it was a total fail, and the entire Chris Reeve forum kind of piled onto me there. That was a little bit ugly. I certainly didn't enjoy it, but at the same time, they have a point. I'm not doing my Chris Reeve Knives disassemblies in the way that most people do. There is a certain orthodoxy that's built up, and in some ways I can see why they take that approach. As soon as I get my Sebenza back from Chris Reeve, hopefully repaired and with an action I can work with, so they made some valid points, but they did so in a way that was a little bit unfortunate and pretty ugly, and left me with a pretty poor taste for that sub-forum. That's okay, though. They're welcome to feel that way, and as a semi-public figure, you gotta take the good with the bad. I get way more hate in the YouTube comments, though, than I ever have from any forum. So it's not really a big deal. So there seems to be a forum and YouTube divide, but honestly, there are haters everywhere, whether they're in the forums, whether they're in the comments, etc. So that's a really great question, though. Sorry about that. Worst logo imprint on the blade. For me, Cold Steel takes the cake on this because, for instance, the Cold Steel Lucky one. But this is a bad example of it too, the Ultimate Hunter. Cold Steel just loves printing crap on their blades for whatever reason. It's really ugly. I've come to the conclusion that Cold Steel's, like, the daughter, a son, a girlfriend, or whoever runs the place must be invested heavily in the laser engraving business. So they're trying to keep them in business. I don't get why they put so much crap on their blades. But Cold Steel is definitely the worst offender there. Let's see here. Matthias Mertens, ever get annoyed on how a knife looks when it's closed? The relationship between the handle and the exposed part of the blade. That's not something that bothers me so much. What does bother me is when knives have really ugly shop sections. For instance, I talk a lot on the channel about a pocket pecker, which is a flipper tab that sticks out very prominently and pecks on whatever's sitting in your pocket all day. Ooh, that's nasty. A little bit of rattle around the detent there. Oh, Benchmade. All right, anyway, so this is a pocket pecker, and so when this knife is closed in your pocket, it's going to be attacking whatever else is in your pocket. Similarly, a lot of people are bothered by this little chunk right here, where there's a little gap between the scales and the back of the blade. Because, again, that can catch on things, can be a little bit ugly. The ADV Pocket Butcher by Andre de Villiers is a great knife, but it's really awkward when it's closed. And so, yeah, it can bug me on occasion, but I gotta say, I'm not as bent out of shape about it as some people. Some people, just because of this little gap, are not gonna like this knife. And so, different grinds for different kinds. That's why there are many knives out there in the world for different people. Justin Densmore, where do you usually get your knives? It really depends. I'm actually not going to talk about that because I don't want to be seen as giving an endorsement to any retailer or another. I've bought from a whole bunch of them. I mean, chances are if you can name a major retailer, I've bought from them at some point in time. But there were a lot of really good ones out there in the world. I did do a video where I went over to Blade HQ. I was out there for a conference, and, that was a lot of fun, and it was great to see, and they were very nice to me. I've also had good experiences. Knife Ship Free is my home team. They are in Michigan. Great company. Knife Center's been good to me. GP Knives, etc. There are a bunch of really great places. It really depends. The one thing I will say is you want to support your local guy if you can, and try and avoid Amazon. Because very often with Amazon, particularly on knives that are very commonly counterfeited, because of a practice called stock commingling, if one vendor sends in a bunch of fake PM2s, it's going to be really hard for them to know that. And so it's a little bit sketchy on occasion. So be careful with Amazon when you're buying knives, and you also tend to get terrible deals there as well. So there you go. That's a great question there. Ross2782 asked, did I wear a knife when I went to Blade HQ? I'm sorry, did I wear a mask? No, I did not. I don't know that they knew who I was at that point, and frankly, I don't know even if they did know who I was that they would give a damn. So that's a great question. Let's see here. I'm going to go ahead and Kanal Wolfki, and I'm going to go ahead and stick to English for this one. Sorry about that. That was a big, long question in Russian, which is very fun, but thank you very much for the support. Let's see here. Am I a Forged in Fire fan? I've never seen it. I'd like to one of these days, but yeah. And then Sebastian Fox asks, are you planning to pick up the new Spyderco Sliver? Yes, I am. This is the Paul Alexander designed compression lock flipper. One of the things that brought me a lot of joy is recently Spider Collector, so it's spidercollector.com, posted new pictures of this guy, of the production version. In one of the pictures, you see the bearings, which means this is not running on Teflon, which means it's probably going to have a decent action. So I'm looking forward very much to that. It's probably not going to be called the Sliver, though. Apparently that conflicts with another knife by another company or something like that, so they're finding a new name for it. So yeah, that's a great question. And actually, guys, it has now been 73 minutes of Asking the Nick here. My voice box is probably going to fall out and splatter on the table before too long if I keep talking. So I hope that this was interesting to everybody, that you had a good time, and thank you, everybody, for coming in. 172 people that's incredible. So, yeah, I hope this has been interesting to you, and have yourselves an absolutely wonderful rest of the day. And remember, support your local gas station. Bye now.